roll the dice, hope for high. Turns in the dungeon, reaching sky.
Good morning, friends. Welcome back to the channel. I'm the GM Philosopher, and today we're talking about how to create a campaign. This means how to write it, how to organize it, how to create the information so that you can run your players through it without getting bogged down, but also so that there's enough information that you can do it without getting held up, without getting lost, etc. Now, to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you a new plot arc module that I actually recently wrote. It's called The Haunting at Ashburrow. It's a 5-session plot arc adventure module designed for any fantasy TTRPG system. But this could easily be stretched into 10 sessions or maybe even more. And that's what a campaign is. It's multiple sessions strung along to create an adventure. Actually, it consists of many adventures a lot of times, but these adventures will have a consistent, cohesive thread. And keeping that straight and figuring out how to write that out in advance is kind of a skill that's a little difficult to master. And I'm going to use this book to show you how I do this. Now, this book, if you'd like to purchase it, it's available now. It's actually been released just today. It is available in a hardcover, in a soft cover, and in a very affordable ebook option. So you can find the link in the description, go to my Blurb bookstore, pick up the version that's right for you, and then you could run this for your group. You could also see firsthand how I write out my campaigns, but I'm going to take you all through it. So you're going to get a close-up, in-depth look at how I write out my campaigns. So let's dive in and talk about it. Just one more quick thing. If you have not ordered your 2024 official D&D Player's Handbook, your official 2024 D&D DMG, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and if you haven't pre-ordered your new Monster Manual yet, well, hey, listen, I have links to those down in the description. Grab those so that you do not fall behind because they're pretty awesome and they will equip you to start your new campaign ASAP. All right, with that being said, let's dive into it. All right, so we're going to go through The Haunting at Ashburrow here is a way for me to show you how I organize my campaigns. Now, with that being said, don't forget I do have a hardcover version of this available, which is pretty awesome. So there's the hardcover, and there's the it's actually pretty awesome. Looks really good. And there's the soft cover version, which I really like the soft cover version, actually. I think it feels really good. I like them both, honestly. But and I use the ebook when I run virtual tabletop. I literally screen grab the images and put them in the chat. But anyway, so there's uses for all the different versions. But I'm going to show you how I go through this. Now, before I dive into this, I just want to say, what is a campaign? A campaign is a string of adventures that lead through a consistent concurrent thread. That thread might be that the players are a part of a guild and they're doing missions, or it could be that there's a big bad trying to destroy the world, or it could be that they're on an epic hunt for a magical artifact. Whatever the common thread is, as the GM, you want to kind of come up with a cohesive storyline, not to necessarily pigeonhole your players into that story, but so that the players have stuff to interact with. So they have challenges to go through. So they have things that they can do, and things to see while you're filling in those pixels around them. Okay. And so planning that out happens when you write down your adventure module or your campaign module. So with that being said, let's dive into this and talk about it. Now, I actually spent a lot of time laying out this adventure module, and it is a 5-session arc, could easily be stretched into 10, and then it could serve as a basis where you could go on and continue to play in the same world. Let me show you what I mean by that. So first of all, we have a little bit of, we have a table of contents here, but we have Welcome to the Adventure, and we have an introduction to the world state. Now, I wrote this campaign module, this adventure module, to take place in my world state of Regenesis. So Regenesis is my world state universe that I run games in, and I have some information about that here, which is pretty cool. The genesis of Regenesis, a world reborn, welcome. And then I have a map of the world, right? And this shows exactly where Ashburrow is on the map, which I think is really cool. And then we have a brief world overview of the continents of Regenesis, and then there is the basically the pantheon information, because each continent, each landmass has its own pantheon of gods and goddesses. So I go through all that here. Now, here's the thing. If you're using a published adventure, for example, if you're going to buy this and run it, or if you're going to run, an official Greyhawk adventure or an official D&D adventure in, the Forgotten Realms or whatever, the world state setting stuff, you may not have to create that. You may just have to decide what world state you're going to be. And if you're going to homebrew your own world, then you're going to need to create some world state information about that. Now, this video isn't necessarily about creating your own world state, but world state is something that there should be a place for in your campaign prep, just like a world map, right? Having a world map is actually really important to the world state information and the campaign, because otherwise, unless it's like a mystery where the players are, they're not going to know where they are. And so that is like one box to check off as you're creating your campaign. A one shot, you can get away without it. Maybe even a couple sessions, you can get away without it. But if you're going to launch an actual campaign, then that's actually an important part of the process. So world state, basically map, that's kind of the first step for a more in-depth campaign. And once again, if you're using a published adventure, if you're running something like this, some of that's taken care of for you. If you're going to buy, an official D&D adventure in the Forgotten Realms or whatever, that's going to be taken care of for you. But if you're homebrewing, you're going to need to take care of that for yourself. By the way, do you struggle to come up with plot arcs on the fly? If so, I have the perfect tool for you. It is called My Ultimate Plot Randomizer. It is a free ebook. When you join my email list, you can download this for free. You'll get the link in your first email. It contains 4 D100 tables that will let you roll random plot arcs whenever you need them. Roll the hook, the conflict, and the conclusion, and even add wild and wacky stuff all right there. Download this, print it out, add it to your tool collection, and you will never go without another plot arc again. I give this away for free to help you create awesome plot arcs just like I do. I use this in almost every single session, and you are not going to want to miss out on this, so make sure you grab this. Now, let's talk about the introduction here. This is actually where we start working on the actual adventure itself. So we have map of the village, Ashburrow. This is the setting, right? So if this is going to be run as a campaign, then we're going to want to have a little more close-up information. World map is awesome, but the players need to know what's going on in their more immediate vicinity. So we have a map here, and we have some information about Ashburrow. And this is background information. Background information on the location where the adventure is taking place. For example, there's population information. There's information about lifestyle, way of life, culture, and traditions. So this campaign was written to be in a very kind of rural, southern, elvish sort of culture. In my world, in Thyrendor, which is basically the continent where the elves were born, and it's the main elven continent, the elves had a great civil war that was basically a war of tradition, where the northern, more modern kingdoms wanted to basically run with new stuff, leave some of the old traditions behind, whereas the elves in the southern, more rural regions, they wanted to maintain staunch traditions. So there's this great big war called the Great Rift War. And that's sort of a setting for this adventure, because in this adventure there's a haunting, but it's taking place in a village that was built on an ancient elven burial ground. So that's just like a setting piece for it, right? Now, we have also a GM copy here, map legend with locations within the village. And the reason that I do this is because I want to be prepared. When the players go to the sawmill, I have a little information about the sawmill. Not a whole lot. In fact, I'll tell you right now, spoiler alert, this is the only section of the book that talks about the Ashburrow sawmill. But in this description, it says, a vital establishment processing timber from the surrounding Darkmog forest. The sawmill provides lumber for construction and trade. It's owned by a good-natured elf gentleman by the name Renan Norrell and operated by skilled workers who ensure sustainable practices to preserve the forest. So as you can see, if you're running this and someone's like, oh, I'm going to go to the sawmill, you could flip to this, find information for that. Now, you can go off the cuff on this stuff. So a lot of times you have to. There's a lot of situations even in this, and I'm running this for my Discord group right now. There's a lot of situations. Oh, spoiler, Discord group, if you're watching this, you might want to stop because there might be some spoilers in here. But anyway, so here's the thing. If you're running off the cuff, then you're going to run off the cuff. But the more prep work you do, the more spontaneous and creative you can be. This is kind of a general rule of thumb. So I like to prepare this stuff ahead of time. So this is just like preparing, what are all the locations they're most likely to visit? Prepare a little bit of information about those places beforehand, and then you can be creative on top of the stuff you've created. So anyway, more locations here. Campaign synopsis and backstory. Okay, so as the GM, I want to know what the campaign synopsis and backstory is. So let's take a look at that. Now, I wrote this out to be pretty specific. This is a pretty specific, like, mystery, haunting type story. So there is a pretty set goal for this campaign. And I'm going to kind of show you how I wrote this out. Campaign goals. And once again, I have to say, if you are in my Discord gaming group, I would say do not watch any more of this video because this is going to contain major spoilers. So, campaign goals. The overarching goal of the Haunting at Ashburrow campaign is for the players to end the haunting that plagues the village of Ashburrow. How they achieve this is left to both player choice and game master discretion, allowing for a dynamic and engaging storytelling experience. Okay, but breaking the curse. To end the haunting, the players will need to break the curse that binds Alania to the mortal realm. There are several paths they might take, each with its own challenges and moral implications. So keep in mind, right here, we're literally talking about the campaign goals, and then we have the campaign goals written here. I've written them out, okay? And in fact, let me just make sure that you can kind of get a good, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so you can kind of get a really good look at how I wrote out these campaign goals. See, I just want to make sure you can see it. And then I also have possible endings. Right now, this is all stuff that I've written out because this is going to basically inform me basically figuring out and keeping track of what the main story is. Okay. So I want to write down these things. So this is basically step 2 here is write down your campaign goals, possible endings for the campaign. Now, keep in mind, the players may not do anything you plan. You know, it might go off the rails. It might change partway through. They might change trajectories partway through. But you want to have some kind of idea about what the story is. So figure out your campaign goals, figure out your possible endings. Okay. Now, we have the story. Now, this story at first is just for me to read as the GM, and it basically outlines the story of this girl named Alania who basically tried to be a volunteer at the church, but she got victimized at the church by this evil priest who was pretending to be good. There was like a demonic influence. The priest was trying to get the attention of this demon. Demon wasn't interested in the priest because he was a scumbag, but he was like a cowardly scumbag who wouldn't commit. But Alania, in her suffering at the hands of the priest and the abuse, she became the perfect target for the demon, and he actually ended up making her a dark pact where she agreed to be basically half demon, and then she could get revenge on the priest. But in exchange, the demon would sort of have a hold on her soul, and she would begin a transformation into like a full demon. So that's the story is written out here. And then she has a dog. She had a wolf dog named Gusty, who was like her friend, and he kind of plays a role in the campaign. But see, here's what I'm doing. This is the backstory, and I'm fleshing it all out. And I'm fleshing it all out so that I can keep my story straight, so that I kind of know the history and what's going on. So I write this stuff out for me, or in this case, also for other GMs who might run the story. So this is an important element of it. So in other words, make sure that you have your story straight. Make sure that you have the story clear just with yourself so that you can present that to players in a cohesive fashion, keeping it consistent along the way. Because one of the biggest things that'll break immersion is when you try to run a campaign and your story isn't consistent. It's like, oh, you found this clue, but then they find out that that clue isn't consistent with another thing. And then you kind of have to tell more and more lies or make up more and more like kind of weird little things to justify your badly thought out clues, right? And that can lead to a really inconsistent story structure. And once again, it's not about pushing the characters on a narrative. It's about showing them consistency when they look at the narrative is really the key to that. So, all right, with that being said, let's move on here and talk about the campaign setup for the players. Setting up the campaign for the players is the first big test of whether you're going to make this campaign super successful. You can have a very simple story. Your story doesn't have to be awesome. It does not have to be awesome. You can have a zany story, a kind of a wacky, big bad, it does not have to be epic. You're not filming a blockbuster movie here. You are running a game that the main story is going to be the player characters and what they do. So they're the main focus of the story. So it's a self-creating, self-succeeding story if you let the players have agency. With that being said, how you set up the campaign for your players is very important. So let's talk about that next. Okay, so campaign setup, campaign arc background information. This is information that you should provide the players before starting the campaign. And then I write a little thing here. Greetings, adventurers. What brings you all together on this occasion is the fact that all of you, for your various skills, experiences, talents, reputations, have been commissioned by a rather prestigious adventurers guild in Thyrendor called the Bronze Accord Fighters Guild to solve what has been described as a haunting in the small village of Ashburrow. So basically, I'm setting this up to be like the players are all part of a guild, and you'd literally read this to the players. And I set this up like this for a reason. I wanted to make it super easy for the GM to understand exactly how to put the players into the campaign. With that being said, you want to do this for your campaign. You want to figure out exactly how you want to insert the players into your campaign. So that's like the next step, is basically find your insertion point and your insertion method for getting players into the campaign. Okay, now another thing is, what information are you going to show the players? What are you going to give them? What are they going to get in terms of information for background? So that's what we're going to talk about next. So basically, the way that I worked this story out was, the players receive a copy of a letter that was sent to the captain of the Bronze Accord Fighters Guild, Captain Malin Stormguard. And this is the letter, basically the commission letter, the letter that was sent by Gideon O'Neill, who was the person who paid for the services. He basically asked if the guild could help them get rid of this haunting. So there's this letter where he basically gives background outline information about the story. It's a 3-page letter signed by Gideon O'Neill. And so he gives all that information, and this is what the players have to go on for background. They can read this letter, and that's going to inform them about the story. So giving your players something to inform them is important. Now, let me say another thing. Not overloading your players with their campaign backstory information is also really important. It can be very easy for players to get overwhelmed by backstory information. So, for example, there's a bunch of world state information in this particular adventure. I created or I included a bunch of information about my world states, but I tried to keep it very simple, very straightforward, right? So, for example, Thyrendor, which is the continent that we're playing in, there's like this much text talking about the continent and the history of it, and then there's the Pantheon with this much text for each. With this much text for each god or goddess, and then all the gods and goddesses are there, and then it goes to the next one. So basically trying to keep it very simple, trying to keep it straightforward so that the players do not get overwhelmed. Now, I understand that there are situations where you're going to have more lore, because maybe you have more lore in your world state, or there's deeper stuff going on, or you've been playing in a certain world for a long time, and the lore in your world has a lot of different stuff. But here's what I want to caution you about. And this is like the next step, basically, is just don't overload your players. At best, make it so that there's like just a couple pages of stuff your characters need to know. And to be really honest, I usually like to keep it at about 1 page. This is actually a lot of information. 3 pages of a letter. And honestly, even if the characters didn't know anything about the world state, they can learn through the campaign, whatever. But the substance of this letter is kind of the most important part of it. Speaking of which, I feel like the letter came out really, really cool. I'm going to zoom in here and show you kind of up close how it looks. So I really like how it came out. I think it looks really good. I love laying out books. I think that designing books and laying books out is super fun. So that's why I love to do this. And once again, you can grab this from my Blurb bookstore. Link is in the description. Hardcover, softcover, and ebook option. All available. Different price points. Very affordable. Okay, so then we have the background. So basically at this point, session 0 has been accomplished. Players have created characters. They've made their classes. You've given them the backstory information. You've helped to answer their questions. You've determined where in the world this is going on. Now we have session 1 goals and content. This is how I write it out. So I'm writing it out literally by session. With that being said, keep in mind that for this particular adventure, I was content heavy. And so you could easily make every one of these sessions 2 sessions, like very easily. In fact, my Discord group is running this instead of as a 5-session arc. They're running it as a 7-session arc just because there's too much content. I don't want to waste anything. We could skip some things, but we're kind of getting into the immersive role play, and I don't want to skip anything. So we're extending it. So there's just quite a bit of content here. But I am also not afraid to cut things. And that's what you want to keep in mind. Sometimes people try to cram too much information into an adventure. They try to cram too much lore, too many enemies, too many fights, too many combats, too many role plays. If you do that, it's going to feel forced and muddied, and you're going to feel more temptation to railroad players to push them toward a narrative, because you're going to kind of be like panicking, like, oh no, come on, like we don't have that much game time left, and I still have these 5 things I wanted to do. But what we want to do is keep it very simple, and I'm going to show you how I arrange these in very simple terms. Okay, here's how I arrange the sessions, and I'm going to zoom in here because I want to. Here we go. I want this to be very, very clear. In fact, we can zoom in just a little bit more. I want you to be able to read this. Okay, so overview, session 1 goals and overview, time span. Morning and early afternoon of day 1. All goals should be accomplished before sundown on day 1. I like to do this because this campaign has calendar sensitive events that happen. So keeping this information straight is important. This is not always important. Sometimes the calendar doesn't matter. But in this adventure, there's like a 3-day festival, and there's stuff that happens every night, and I want to keep the story straight. So having a calendar guide is important. Okay, goal number 1. So for each session, I have a series of goals. There are 5 goals for the first session. Goal number 1: describe that the players have met up and are now about a half mile down the road from Ashburrow. So basically just players meeting up. Easy. Goal accomplished. Goal number 2, describe a wolf sighting. Now, I'm not going to get into the lore. This video isn't about the lore of this story, but basically in every session, the players have the sighting of this ghostly wolf, and that starts to build into the story, and I don't want to forget about it. So I put it on my main goals page so I don't forget about it, okay? Goal number 3, describe the group's meeting with their contact, a human priest in training named Damien Roughcliffe. And then I've got sub goals, which are basically just like notes for the meeting with Damien Roughcliffe that I don't want to forget as the game master. And so this is very helpful, but that's a goal. And then we have goal number 4, describe the group's meeting with the high priestess of the temple, Renisa Egwin, where they are given holy water to douse their weapons with. This is actually a really important part of the story. She gives them this gift, which is going to help them later. It's a surprise tool to help us later, as they say. And then goal number 5, the first battle with the demon, which takes place in the church after a bit of conversation with the high priestess. So, so there's a combat in the goals for the session, and then we have the session end, make sure it comes to a close before sundown. So that is how I arrange my goals per session. And I think that this is really important. And honestly, with a campaign, there are 2 different ways to do it. Now, you can plot it all out in advance, but you don't have to do that. In this book, I have plotted out the whole campaign arc, and this is a campaign arc. There isn't enough information here to run like from 0 to 20. I mean, honestly, you run up to level 20. There's not enough content here. There is enough content here for a good 10 sessions. And then after this campaign is done, you can have a solid basis for moving on. So we're looking at, this could be at the most like a quarter of a whole campaign worth of session material, unless the group decides to stay in this village and live here, in which case this could actually maybe help be a full level 1 to 20 campaign module. But this was designed to be 5 sessions, can easily be run as 10 sessions, and honestly will probably be better if it's run as 10 sessions. But here's the thing. All of the goals for all of the sessions are written out in advance. You have them all available here. And then as you go through each chapter, so there's the goals here, and then everything you need to accomplish the goals are found in the pages. So as the players approach the village, literally what the GM should read, meeting their contact, Damien Roughcliffe. Here's a picture of him. Here is information about him. And then we have talking points, the stuff he's going to say to them, right? Places they'll pass on the way into the village, right? Anything that I was going to use, there's a meeting with a contact. There's a picture of her here that I can show them. There's going to be, I have these sections called GM Philosopher Notes, and this is basically my plans for how to run those things. There's another NPC here that they're going to meet in this session, possibly, right? And then when they go to the tavern, they're going to meet the barkeep, the barmaid, right? Another barmaid. So we have this content here, basically giving you everything you need, some notes about other stuff going on. I don't want to, like, this video isn't necessarily about this story, but I'm showing you how I structure the story to inform running a campaign. We have the high priestess information, and then we have information about that encounter. And then we have the combat. So I have a whole section here where I talk about combat. And basically, this is where I put the tactics and abilities that the bad guy is going to use, or in this case, the bad girl, the demon girl, Alania. She attacks the party. We have setting the scene. I've described kind of what happens to set the mood. And then we have her combat tactics and abilities here, right? And then the possible outcomes of the combat. And then boom, we're ready for session 2. And I lay session 2 out in the same way. I start with the goals, and then I include everything needed in the following pages to help accomplish those goals, right? So as a GM, you could just flip through this, go from front to back, and run the campaign. With that being said, let me tell you a little something about setting up campaigns like this. When you are running a published campaign, it's going to be set up like this for a reason, to maintain continuity, okay? And to give you pixels to put around your player characters at every stage of the story. However, when you are running your own campaign, you may not choose to, and you may not even want to, write everything down in a series of goals, okay? So you're probably not going to have every session plotted out before the session starts if you are homebrewing a campaign. And let me tell you why. Because every session you play, and then you're probably going to determine what the next step is during the session prep for the next session. And that is when you will write down your goals. So really, what you're going to be looking at is the campaign is going to be written as you go, instead of all of it being written at the very beginning. There's a reason why most GMs don't write out their campaigns the way that I wrote this one out right from the beginning. And the reason is because it would take months and months and months of effort, just like this did. Writing this out took me literally months worth of effort, planning, like meticulous scrutinizing of the story, etc. And a lot of GMs simply do not have months, hours, thousands of hours of time to invest into doing that. That's why published adventures, yes, that kind of time is put into it, but do not put that on yourself to create as you're creating your homebrew campaign. This is how I create homebrew campaigns. I follow this same format. I have a goal for every session, but I do not create the next session until we've played the session before. So for example, I'm running a session for my core group, my physical like tabletop group, the one who comes to my house that we play at my house this coming Saturday. But what I'm doing is I am writing out basically one session's worth of content for the next session. I'm going to make some simple goals, and then I'm going to give myself all the information I need to finish the goals for that session. I'm going to lay out the NPCs. I'm going to lay out the, I'm going to lay out the combat details, etc. But the thing is that I'm only going to do that for one session. Then we're going to play that session, and I'm going to let the aftermath of that session dictate how I move on to then set up the next session. And a lot of times that's how GMs do it. They're not going to set up the whole campaign from the get-go. There might be an outline, and if you have calendar specific things, there might be a time outline, and that is important to keep track of. However, a lot of the times what you're going to have is you're going to have a session, you're going to run it, and then you're going to set up the next session after you run it. And once again, I'm just going to demonstrate to you how I like to run these sessions, or set them up, should I say. I like to set a couple basic goals for the session. I like to set up one serious combat or in-depth role play for the session. And then I want to leave plenty of time for players to role play, plenty of time for players to do the things they want to do. They may want to go to the blacksmith. They may want to go to the tavern. They may want to engage in an arm wrestling competition at the local fair, whatever it is. I want to leave plenty of room for players to do the stuff they want to do. So I don't want to over plan, but I do want to set up those session goals that are very simple and easy to make, and I keep them one-dimensional. I try to keep them simple enough that they could kind of happen anywhere. They could kind of happen no matter what the party chooses to do. And the reason I do that is because I want to keep the narrative consistent, and I want to keep the clues consistent and the calendar consistent, despite the characters doing their own thing, giving them maximum agency while also creating maximum backdrop for story. That's the goal, right? So I just want to reiterate, you do not have to get this in depth. Like, I love having this. Running this game for my Discord group is so awesome because everything is already done. And we create all kinds of other stuff. Like, all kinds of stuff happens that wasn't written in here. But if I'm looking for an NPC, I know exactly which NPC it's going to be, right? So here we go. Oh, flipping this NPC, do a quick overview of this NPC. Boom. Now I role play this NPC. And then there's even the information about what she shares with the party. But she could also talk a lot more, but I do have the information about what she shares with the party. And this makes it really easy to maintain a consistent story frame, okay? With that being said, you do not have to have a whole published adventure to run successful campaigns. What you do need to do is this, basic bare minimum. You need to give yourself a couple goals for each session that you want to do to keep the story consistent. You want to make sure that your whole campaign has sort of a consistent story and thread. And this takes us back to the story part, right? I wrote out the story of this campaign back in the GM section, but I wrote that out because I wanted to keep a consistent thread, right? I want to keep a consistent thread for the story. So I know what the story is. I have my campaign goals. I know my possible endings. So we have a compass point, a focus point, and then we have the story. This is the details of the story. I can go back and I can review this, find names, details, etc., check myself on lore, but if I keep this as concise but yet as detailed as possible, enough to inform me, boom, there I have my backdrop. This serves as like the litmus, the center point for my lore, for my story. Not that it can't evolve, but I want to stay consistent, right? I want to stay consistent. So, and that's important for maintaining immersion. So I'm going to stay consistent, maintain immersion, and then I can create session by session. I don't have to create all at once. If I'm running a published campaign, that's awesome. But if I'm running a homebrew campaign, I'm going to create the next session, and then I'm going to play that session, then I'm going to create the next session, etc. And then I'm going to keep really good notes, right? And then we're going to just maintain that immersion and that consistency for the story throughout the encounter while also giving maximum player agency. And boom, that is going to be awesome. And then character arcs. One thing that's not written in here, because it can't be written in here, is the importance of character arcs. And the importance of character arcs to a campaign cannot go understated. I have a lot of information in here about the story, but a huge part of the story is what happens with the characters themselves. So for example, in my Discord group that I'm running this for right now online, one of the characters, they have this personal quest where they're trying to find who killed their pet panther. He's a druid, a Goliath druid from way up in the mountains, and he basically found his panther dead one day. Someone had attacked his home while he was gone on a mission. Came back to find her slaughtered, but she had a particular type of spearhead broken off in her body, and a couple arrows he found in the scene were very specifically designed. And so he's been on the hunt looking for who might have done this. Turns out that when he came to this village, which is, I mean, it's kind of a ways away, but it's not that far away. Someone in this village is also using those arrows because they got in a fight, and he saw an arrow get shot and the arrow almost hit him, and he immediately recognized it. Then he captured the elf who shot it at him. The elf said, I don't know anything about what you're talking about. I just know that I bought my arrows from the local Fletcher. So now there's a whole personal plot arc where that druid is going to go looking for the Fletcher to find out where they got the arrows. Are they part of the group who killed his panther, or did they just sell the arrows to the person? That could be a lead, right? So there's a whole element to a campaign that is personal character plot arcs that is really important, that you do not want to discount that. So that's another thing that you can't put into a published adventure. That has to be done between the GM and the players, and that's part of the magic of playing D&D or any other TTRPG, is that you're going to have basically portions of the story that are so specific to the characters they can't be written down in advance. You can only let those things evolve naturally as the story progresses. And that is going to be a wrap. Thank you so much for getting together with me here on another episode of GM Philosophy in the Morning. I'm here every single day creating videos about the best game in the world, D&D. So I will see you awesome people on the next one.